The Broken Blueprint, Part 2. Ellen White strongly objects. Apparently, Ellen White did not find what she had written on the subject, so that day, May 14, she wrote a follow-up letter to Megan, stating her convictions in the matter even more strongly. I bear positive testimony that you and your fellow workers in Madison are doing the work that God has appointed to you. The attitude of opposition or indifference on the part of some of your brethren has created conditions that have made your work more difficult than it should have been. But the Lord is pleased that you have not been easily discouraged. Some have entertained the idea that because the school at Madison is not owned by a conference organization, those who are in charge of the school should not be permitted to call upon our people for the means that is greatly needed to carry on their work. This idea needs to be corrected. The Lord Jesus will one day call to account those who would so tie your hands that it is almost impossible for you to move in harmony with the Lord's biddings. You are just as much entitled to ask for that which you need as are other men to present the necessities of the work in which they are engaged. As you carry on this work in harmony with the Lord's will, you are not to be kept on a constant strain to know how to secure the means you need in order to go forward. The Lord forbids the setting up of walls and bands around workers of experience who are faithfully acting their God-given part. Much precious time has been lost because man-made rules and restrictions have been sometimes placed above the plans and purposes of God. In the name of the Lord, I appeal to our conference workers to strengthen and support and labor in harmony with our brethren at Madison, who are carrying forward a work that God has appointed to them. EGW to Percy Megan, May 14, 1907, Spalding Megan Unpublished Testimonies, pages 411 to 412. Elder W.C. White, Ellen White's son, was her constant companion. He knew her thinking and unfailingly stood in support of her decisions. May 23, 1907, St. Helena. Spent the forenoon with W.C. White. He gave me Sister White's letters to Daniels regarding us. He told me he did not agree with the administration at Washington in insisting that all monies pass through their hands. Said that he would not agree to our going under conference domination. Megan Diary Entry, Thursday, May 23, 1907. Before leaving this matter, it should be noted that an earlier letter by Ellen White, written to Elder Watson, president of the Colorado Conference, was also over this battle for funds. In her letter, dated January 22, 1905, she forcefully told Watson that he had no right forbidding the sending of tithe by church members directly to independent ministries. If you wish to read the entire letter, you will find it on page 215 to 216 of the book, Spalding Megan Unpublished Testimonies. It is also available in the unusually complete Spirit of Prophecy compilation, The Truth About Tithe, available from the publisher of this present book. One delicate problem of a self-supporting institution, independent of direct guidance of the conference, was the source from which funds might be secured, especially for the purchase of property and the construction of the buildings. Naturally, the leaders of the new school thought of their friends and former associates who lived in areas where money flowed more freely. Appeals made from the south would, of course, lead to responses from the north and west. And it was not easy at times for those carrying the responsibilities of local work to stand by and watch sizable amounts of money being sent to another field. Merlin Neff, For God and CME, page 114. All the while, Ellen White was busily writing letters. Here is part of one from January 1908. The Lord works through various agencies. If there are those who desire to step into new fields and take up new lines of labor, encourage them to do so. Seventh-day Adventists are doing a great and good work. Let no man's hands be raised to hinder his brother. Those who have had experience in the work of God should be encouraged to follow the guidance and counsel of the Lord. Do not worry, lest some means shall go direct to those who are trying to do missionary work in a quiet and effective way. All the means is not to be handled by one agency or one organization. There is much business to be done conscientiously for the cause of God. Help is to be sought from every possible source. Ellen G. White, to those bearing responsibilities in Washington and other centers, January 6, 1908, Unpublished Testimonies, pages 421 to 422. Her letter continues. To those in our conferences who have felt that they had authority to forbid the gathering of meat in a certain territory, I now say, this matter has been presented to me again and again. I now bear my testimony in the name of the Lord to those whom it concerns. Wherever you are, withhold your forbiddings. The work of God is not to be thus trammeled. God's work is being faithfully served by these men whom you have been watching and criticizing. They fear and honor the Lord. They are laborers together with him. God forbids you to put any yokes on the necks of his servants. It is the privilege of these workers to accept gifts or loans that they may invest them to help in doing an important work that greatly needs to be done. This wonderful burden of responsibility, which some suppose God has placed upon them with their official position, has never been laid upon them. If men were standing free on the platform of truth, they would never accept the responsibility to frame rules and regulations that bind and cramp God's chosen laborers in their work for the training of missionaries. When they learn the lessons that all ye are brethren, they will remove the yokes that are now binding their brethren. The forbidden becomes official. Unfortunately, Ellen White's counsel was totally ignored. 4 months later, the May 14 issue of the Review reported a General Conference action that no money should be made available to independent ministries. It said in part, resolved, that any special enterprises for which donations are solicited from the people should first receive the sanction of the General Conference and the Union Conference in which such enterprise is undertaken, and that any person sent out to solicit such donations first receive suitable credentials from the Union Conference from which he comes, and that unsatisfactory arrangements be made, certified in writing, with the union and local conferences in which he wishes to solicit before he enters upon his work. Conference action reported in Review, May 14, 1908. As soon as a copy of that issue of the Review reached her, only 12 days from Washington, D.C. to California, she wrote a blistering letter addressed to all the leaders at the General Conference. Here are a few excerpts of this lengthy letter. To the officers of the General Conference, when I read the resolutions published in the Review, placing so many restrictions upon those who may be sent out to gather funds, I was sorry for the many restrictions. Unless the converting grace of God comes into the conference, a course will be taken that will bring the displeasure of God upon them. We have had enough of the spirit of forbidding. This morning I could not sleep after midnight. I awoke bearing this message to our leading men. Break every yoke that would hinder or limit the power of the third angel's message. The calls that have been made for large liberality, which have been responded to so nobly by our people, should lead to feelings of confidence and gratitude rather than to the placing of yokes upon the necks of God's servants. A much greater work would have been done if men had not been so zealous to watch and hinder some who were seeking to obtain means from the people to carry forward the work of the Lord. Is man to be a dictator to his fellow man? Is he to take responsibility of saying, "You shall not go to such a place"? There is need of a great reformation in our ranks. EGW, to the officers of the General Conference, May 26, 1908. Low cost book sales. A related source of irritation to church leaders was the fact that the workers in the South were publishing and selling books at prices below that of the regular publishing houses. Believers were donating funds to independent groups, which not only helped them in their mission work, but also enabled them to publish these lower cost books. The people to whom God has given his means are amenable to him alone. It is their privilege to give direct aid and assistance to missions. It is because of the misappropriation of means by the regular channels that the Southern Field has no better showing than it has today. I do not consider it the duty of the Southern branch of our work in the publication and handling of books to be under the dictation of our established publishing houses. And if means can be devised to reduce the expense of publishing and circulating my books, let this be done. I have to say, my brother, that I have no desire to see the work in the South moving forward in the old regular lines. When I see how strongly the idea prevails that the methods of handling our books in the past shall be retained because what has been must be, I have no heart to advise that former customs shall continue. E.G.W. Letter 60, 1901. Why did Ellen White consider the bookwork so important? Because she knew that when low-cost copies of our best missionary publications are placed in the hands of believers, it is a most powerful way to spread the truth faster and wider than living preachers could. This is why she frequently called them the silent preachers. In a dream, 1966-75, Ellen White was shown the importance of heavily reducing the price of missionary books and the opposition it would receive. In the first part of the dream, she was shown the importance of distributing Spirit of Prophecy books and other books which reveal Satan's devices. Later in the dream, Christ himself speaks. Because books were being sold at low prices, some being especially reduced for the occasion, many were purchased, and some by persons not of our faith. They said, "It must be that these books contain a message for us." These people are willing to make sacrifices in order that we may have them, and we will secure them for ourselves and our friends. But the satisfaction was expressed by some of our own people. One said, "A stop must be put to this work, or our business will be spoiled." As one brother was carrying away an armful of books, a canvasser laid his hand upon his arm and said, "My brother, what are you doing with so many books?" Then I heard the voice of our counselor saying, "Forbid them not. This is a work that should be done. The end is near. Already much time has been lost when these books should have been in circulation. Sell them far and near. Scatter them like the leaves of autumn. This work is to continue without the forbiddings of anyone. Souls are perishing out of Christ. Let them be warned of his soon appearing in the clouds of heaven." Some of the workers continued to appear more cast down. One was weeping and said, "These are doing the publishing work an injustice by purchasing these books at so low a price. Besides, this work is depriving us of some of the revenue by which our work is sustained." The voice replied, "You are meeting with no loss. These workers who take the books at reduced prices could not obtain so readily sale for them except it be at this so-called sacrifice. Many are now purchasing for their friends and for themselves who otherwise would not think of buying." Testimonies for the Church, Volume 9, pages 72 to 73. Earlier independent publications. It is a significant fact that Ellen White's attention was turned to independent printing facilities over a decade before she urged independent training schools. Following the crisis at the 1888 conference, When important leaders at the review and the general conference opposed her message for a time, she was guided to publish her next book release, Steps to Christ, 1892, through an outside publishing house, Fleming H. Revell Company. Later, in the spring of 1903, as the book Education was nearing completion, she very nearly gave the book to Sutherland and Megan at Emmanuel Missionary College to print. Both her son, W. C. White, and C. H. Jones were in on the project. Megan Diary entry, March 25 to 26, 1903. Repeatedly, the independent ministries in the South published various missionary publications. In late 1910, she arranged for a small printing press to be purchased for her grandchildren, the twins Henry and Herbert, so they could start an independent printing business in Battle Creek, which they did with fervor. One of them, Herbert, was still printing independent books as late as the 1950s. In later years, Percy Megan, by that time at Loma Linda, wanted to print a book, Counsels to Medical Workers, compiled from the writings of Ellen White, but met with such stiff opposition from church leadership that he gave up the project. Church leaders said they did not want him to receive the royalties on such a book, which he wanted to use to help fund graduating medical students when they first went to foreign fields. The Review and Pacific Press wanted to keep the royalties for themselves. The later books, Counsels on Health in 1923 and Medical Ministry in 1932, were not as rich in the available resources from her writings on the subject as his would have been. Our own compilation, the Medical Missionary Manual, probably comes closer to his plan. In 1921, Megan wrote a letter to the CME president about the problem. This letter is remarkable for what it tells us. Ellen White strongly considered removing all her books from denominational control and publication. I have a letter from C. H. Jones, manager at Pacific Press, telling how the council turned down our proposition concerning royalties on the medical book. This, however, was no disappointment to me, as I knew that would be the end of the matter in the hands of the men who handled it. There is absolutely nothing to their arguments except unbelief in the spirit of prophecy on the royalty question. Sister White foresaw all of this many years ago. She had absolutely no confidence in the management of the Review and Herald as it existed at that time, and she begged W. C. White to take her books away from them and also from the Pacific Press, and urged that they should publish her testimonies themselves. I was living in her home and working for her at the time, and she talked to me about the matter not once or twice, but over and over again. I greatly fear that this royalty question is just one link in the long cable of apostasy that is coming on. I do not want, however, to get into the state of mind where I will charge apostasy against my brethren and not feel that I am in danger along the same lines myself. You and I and our medical group have much to do to keep our work here where God wants it to be. It would have cost the Review and Herald and the Pacific Press no more to let the money, which properly should go to the authors as royalty, go into missions as a gift from the publishing house, who have already no right to it at all. Megan to Newton Evans, CME President, November 11, 1921. It is clear from the above letter that Ellen White was guided to want her books henceforth to be published by independent ministries. She had been shown that there was great danger when a single organization, even though it be our own denomination, could have printing and copyright control over all her writings. An example of this danger is shown in the early 1980s, when a young believer in Switzerland, primarily at his own expense, doing paper hanging, printed great controversy in Romanian, German, and French. He smuggled the Romanian print runs, at great danger to himself, into Romania, still at that time behind the Iron Curtain. But our Hamburg publishing house, Advent Verlag, in Hamburg, Germany, threatened to have him jailed for copyright infringement when he tried to widely distribute German and French editions of the book. Yet there was no error in his editions. He had only typeset from standard German and French editions. Within a couple years, he totally gave up in discouragement. The present author has copies of every great controversy printed by our publishing houses throughout the world for purposes of reprinting. Editions of that book, printed by the denomination, are generally very costly, and not many are sold. The Spalding Megan Collection. This opposition to Madison and related independent ministry publishing and missionary projects continued for years. If you question that fact, purchase a copy of the Unpublished Testimonies, also called the Spalding Megan Unpublished Testimonies. It's 498, 8.5 by 11 pages, containing 151 letters, primarily consist of letters by Ellen White about this and other matters relating to the work of independent ministries, primarily in the Southern field. The history of Madison is highly significant. Ellen White spent so much time pleading, praying, and writing in defense of it. Madison represented something very important, a way that God's work would be able to more fully succeed in later years. Looking back on it, with all that we know today, we can understand why God also wanted independent ministries to help finish the work on earth.